This is the Special Council Committee meeting, March 22nd, 2016. We've got the first, well, really the only major item on the agenda is progress and revitalization. Mr. Cahill?
Yes, sir. So we are going to be discussing several things today, but one of the first ones will be the rental permit ordinance. Mr. Fields, I believe, has some information for us.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. What everybody has in front of them is a new draft of the ordinance that changes that we're going to propose to make to our existing ordinance for the rental permit. I know this is the first time that everybody has seen it, so I wanted to have this meeting so that we could go through each part of this. It's something that the mayor and I, the codes enforcement officers and all the staff and the city attorney has been working on for quite a while now. I don't see him here. We've actually had meetings with the Northern Kentucky Greater Cincinnati Apartment Association.
Apartment Owners Association.
Apartment Owners Association. Yeah. Mr. Fullenkamp that owns Centonia is a big part of that. He was going to be here tonight. As a matter of fact, David and I met with them last week. Yeah, and got their final blessing on this. They don't have any issues with it whatsoever. We did change a couple more words in this because of that meeting. And if we want to, and whatever you all want me to do, if you want me to go through each one of these changes, I'd be more than happy to do that. Just walk through it page by page. It's kind of what I was planning on doing. Is that okay with everybody?
Sure. Yes.
So we didn't change anything. If you notice, everything that will be struck through is the things that we've deleted. The underlined portions have been added to this. The first one will be on the second page under inspection. We changed the definition of inspection, and it shall just mean the compliance with all the applicable property maintenance laws. In the owner, we changed it to mean the owner means the deed owner of the residential unit. On the third page, the requirements. Everybody who is engaged in the residential, under A, 2A, everybody who is engaged in the residential rental business, unless it is an owner occupied. That was one of the things that we hadn't put in here before. What we were doing is we were not requiring those buildings of less than 4 units to get one. If in fact, we weren't enforcing it that way. So if in fact the owner lived there in the building, we weren't requiring them to get that as running a business, being an absentee owner more than anything else.
How many places does that apply to now?
How many?
Yeah, with 4 units or more. How many complexes are we talking about?
I don't know if I understand the question.
How many total have we?
Wow.
Yeah,
I don't know if we know a total.
We have now that we're inspecting.
We never kept numbers that way.
Okay, not 4 or less, but I know we have a list of the number of units out there.
Right.
Do we have that number? I guess that's what he wants, right?
Well, yeah, number of, like we've got, I don't know, they're not 4 seasons anymore, but you know, there's a complex right across the street.
Right.
There's, there's I don't know if it's Greenfield anymore either, but Greenfield Apartments, how many apartment complexes are we? What's the scope of this ordinance? As I guess what I'm trying to understand.
The scope of this, there were 812 or 16. I think it was 816
units.
Different PDINs. Now, different PDINs that we talked about. Now, in those PDINs, I'll give you Bluegrass Manor, for example, which is right down here on Laurie Drive. Bluegrass Manor consists of 4 PDINs, but I think there are 12 buildings. I think there's 12 buildings on those 4 PDINs, and each apartment or each building has somewhere, what about 16? 16 units, I think, in each one. So that 816 number was the number that we started with. So that's the number of PDINs, not the number of units. Okay. So is that?
Yeah, I guess I was trying to just understand how many landlords are we really talking about here? I mean, you've got Bluegrass, right? That's one. Right. Although it's, I don't know, hundreds of units, right? I'm just trying to understand how many people are actually affected.
Well, There's, like
From
I
a
said,
landlord standpoint.
from a landlord standpoint,
Yeah.
probably in that 800 range. Yeah.
That's saying we have 800 complexes?
It's saying no.
No,
There's
right.
more than
800
that.
units.
There's actually more rental units than that. We had tried to get a pretty good handle on that before, and I think, you know, when we were looking at it before, it was in excess of 2,000 units.
I thought his question was, how many of the apartments or apartment buildings are actually lived in by the owner
Right.
that have.
That's what I thought it was too.
floors? Is that what you meant?
That's what I
was trying
thought.
to understand.
Yeah,
That this change in this definition made, well, Mark and Darrell aren't here, so I know that we've been trying to enforce the existing ordinance as it is today. When you did all the inspections, do you have any kind of number about how many were owner occupied? If you had a duplex that I lived in one side and I rented out the other side? Okay. And I know, Sherry, you're issuing the permits, and I mean, some we have excluded off of that list.
Yes,
Do you have any idea what that number was? We can get that number for you that we have, that we know right now.
that we excluded. I don't know right off the top of my head, but I can get the number.
Okay. My guess is that is very few.
But they're excluded, right?
They're excluded, absolutely.
They're owner occupied.
So if that was the question about how many of those are we talking about that are excluded from that, then that number is very few. But that was something administratively we talked about when we started doing it, and we started getting that feedback from those people, you know, when they had to apply for this, and we just excluded that. Or if it was a family member. So if in fact you are renting a house to your child or something, we've excluded those also. We have not required those people to get one because it wasn't a business at that point in time, we didn't think.
But under this new change, somebody renting to their child, even though they're not living in it, would now be.
No. Still
There's not a-
administratively, we're not gonna do that administratively.
Okay.
Yeah.
So even though it's not owner occupied,
Do what, sir?
even though it's not owner occupied, we're still gonna
Family
ignore that.
occupied, if it's family occupied, yeah. We have excluded those. Now, that brings up a really good question, because, you know, since we haven't put that in here, you know, do we need to add that?
Well, that,
By
I would think
definition.
that would mean we
By
would change the
definition.
definition of owner
Right.
to be owner or immediate family.
Well, we could put another definition in there somewhere, right? Or under the requirements, just put it under requirements, unless the occupant is a family member of the property owner. We could do that. Would everybody feel more comfortable with that?
I mean, I,
Because we're not going to enforce it that way, because I think that's an issue.
Add to that, because if you're asking for if it's a family member, it could be an uncle and aunt or something to that effect. If we just put it to, specify to, as a member of the immediate family.
yeah, I mean, it feels wrong to be pushing an ordinance forward that we're already not planning on enforcing parts of it.
Right, it wasn't in the original one either,
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
So,
My concern is I don't want to put the work on these guys that, let me see your birth certificate, let me see your family tree.
yeah.
I know, Darryl, yours is kind of straight.
well, that's why we're here to discuss that, so, and I asked them here tonight to make sure that we did that, so. I don't believe it's that many, to be honest with you.
I don't either. I think we need to make it easiest for those guys who possibly can, because it's ridiculous.
That's the
Is that gonna cause you all an issue? Okay, so do we just want to put family, or do we want to put immediate family? What do we want to
I
put?
think we should put family. I mean, I understand your concern with that, but I don't want these guys to have to do a genealogy.
You know, I think, so,
We're gonna put blood tests in our cars. What are you talking about?
yeah. Are we at
I mean,
section
we've taken the
2
word of people, we've not
We're at
investigated
2.0A.
that deeply. We're
Sherry
finding
just
single
said that there
family.
were 89.
89?
89.
89 that we've excluded like that? So 89.
We're at section 2A, is that where we are right now?
Yes, sir.
Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
Yes, sir.
The, I think the idea there was, we're trying not to keep someone from being an entrepreneur. If they buy a two-family, this could be someone that's you know, fresh out of college, and trying to promote them to, or trying to promote that entrepreneurial spirit, and not holding them back with a, you know, license and, you know, the Kenton County license and reporting the taxes and, you know, the whole idea here. I mean, one of the things that Mark had pushed so much for this was having the contact information. You know, in the case that grass was high or, you know, paint was peeling, and you know, the thought was if the owner's right there on site, it shouldn't be as much of an issue if it's not a huge complex.
Yeah.
So what are we proposing? Taking out the family part of it?
Add that, or family occupied.
Or family occupied?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you gonna
Right.
define family, though?
Yeah,
Because
that's what's
I've
scaring me.
got a house next to me that the sister rents to a sister, and I swear they're doing drugs. I know they are, because cars park there in front of that house all the time. They don't take care of the property. The property's a mess. There was a couch out in the side yard for like 6 months, and I was afraid to say anything because of retaliation. And I think that's why a lot of our citizens are the same way. They do not want to be identified. They'll come to me and they'll complain to me, but they won't say anything to up here because they don't want their neighbors to know that they were involved. And that's sad. So you need to define family.
Well, and how many families?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's got to stop someplace. You might be better off just leaving it
You know?
owner occupied, and then if you need to go in, you know, you've got that. But if you feel like it's, you know, somebody's child and you don't want to, I mean,
I agree. I don't think we need to put it in there.
I'm afraid there's too many loopholes in family.
Well, if we define family, if we come up with a definition, we'll send that out and see if y'all agree on that,
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
that is.
That'd be good.
Okay.
I have a question. I apologize, I was late, but 5 o'clock came really early today. Does every day.
You're retired now, right?
Huh?
I said, you're retired now, right? I'm just kidding.
I don't know how to work.
That's true.
Okay, on this one, it says on part A 2.0, the part in parentheses, the A parentheses. Okay, unless it's owner occupied, building of less than 4 rental units.
Yes.
Okay, if you have two family members residing in 2 different rental units, does that get counted in the 4?
No. We were looking at 4 rental units, and I believe our intention behind that was in one building.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to define family. We're going to add our family occupied.
Good
in
luck
there.
with that.
And then we're going to define.
Family.
Add family.
I'm
Adopted
sure.
family.
I'm sure our fine attorneys will figure out some way to define family.
Now, we didn't decide if we're going to put family in there, right? We
What?
didn't see- Or did we already make the decision we were going to add family? Because I thought some of us didn't want to do
I
that.
think that's what we said, wasn't
Because
it?
you're going to get adopted family.
We need to come up with a recommendation, Corinne. That's-
Huh?
We need to come up with a recommendation. That's
Yeah,
the
I
idea,
mean-
so.
But, so what do we gain? I'm sorry, I'm not completely following this with the family thing. What's the point of, why are we adding family to it?
What is the point?
I don't
Because we
know.
weren't in,
Because we're saying that we're not gonna enforce it if it's family.
We already do it.
So to me, it just seems odd to be putting an ordinance forward that we already know we're not going to enforce.
Oh, so you're saying that the person whose name's on the deed does not live on site, but a family member?
Then they're saying that they're not gonna enforce that, so let's at least,
Okay, okay, I'm
put it
with
in
you
the
now.
ordinance to that effect.
I don't like it.
I don't think we should.
yeah, operationally, we weren't doing it before. That was a decision that we'd made administratively. When somebody came in and said, well, you know, it's my son or my daughter, you know, I bought this house, they're living in it, they can't afford it. So we did that. So if y'all want us to enforce it, we'll enforce it. We can leave it out and just enforce it. And if you got your son or daughter living there and you're renting it to them, then
Seems like it'd be
you
a
got to do it.
nightmare.
I mean, that's up to you all.
I like the owner's name on the deed,
That's what I-
period.
That's what I was thinking
Yeah,
too.
Yeah.
I really do think, otherwise you're going to have too many, you're making it too complicated, I
Yeah,
think.
exactly.
For these poor guys that have to enforce it.
Yeah.
You know, they're going to say, well, this is my adopted family, and
That's true.
Well, I think if you define
have 10
family, it's
kids,
not
then
gonna be an
have 10
adopted
buildings.
family, but, I mean, we'll do it either way you all wanna do it. And
So
I mean,
what-
this is your ordinance.
So what do we got? I mean, let's just make this easy. Who wants family in there?
Yeah, who wants family?
Well, if we're not gonna,
The hell with
if we're gonna, if we're not gonna enforce family,
So,
let's say, let's add family. I just want, whatever it is, I think it should be what we're gonna enforce.
And that's fine. So do we want family in there or not, is the
No.
question.
Oh, I say
That's,
no.
you know.
No.
No.
okay, so now if we have an owner occupied, if I buy a duplex, just like the mayor said, I just got out of college, you know, I just got my first job, I'm lucky enough to buy that first piece of property, and I decide I wanna buy a duplex, and rent out half of it to help me pay my house payment. So they're a business
Yeah.
now, right?
Right.
Huh? So we wanna take that completely out unless it's an owner, we take that owner occupied out, right?
No, we're not saying taking
No,
owner
no,
occupied
no.
out, we're saying it's only the owner. So
Only
the
the
definition of owner is,
Okay,
Yes,
so
you
we
have
wanna
it
leave
now.
owner in there and we're just gonna forget about family altogether.
Right.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so an owner occupied of less than 4 units, okay? So that means if they got a fourplex, they have to get one, but if they have a duplex, they don't have to, right? We're okay with that?
I don't have a clue, I'm sorry. What if you have single houses?
Huh?
What if you have single houses with?
Well, if you have a single house and you're the owner.
You're not gonna live in it.
It's not a rental.
Yeah, they are.
You mean if you own?
I don't
more than
rent to
one house?
myself.
Right,
Kids don't live in their houses for free.
well, then you're gonna get a permit.
Then you gotta get
I
a
would
permit,
have a permit.
No, that's what we're saying, we're
That's
not
what
gonna
we're saying.
exempt those now,
since they're not the owners.
right? Right.
Sorry, that was a big 5 minutes.
Okay, we all right now? We'll just forget about that other family part, and we'll start enforcing that the other way, all right?
Do we want to ask Daryl and his other brother Daryl?
Go ahead, Darrell. All right.
Okay.
Daryl, do you feel like you have an easy way of tracking that information down? But as far as the deed holder? Okay. Okay. Good.
Well, good. Okay.
What about tracking down properties that might be like a single-family house that, you know, yeah, that are not on the list? Okay, great. Sorry, we may have been getting ahead of ourselves there.
So, on the next one under B, we put in there that that each landlord shall update the city every 12 months on each property currently rented or listed for rent within the city. So, what we're going to do is we're gonna make this July 1st of every year. And, you know, to have it 1 month instead of saying, okay, you know, I got my rental permit today, all right, in March.
Okay.
And having these spread out all over the year, Sherry and her staff thought it would be easier to have it every just 12 months, so we're gonna make them July, so we're gonna send them notices out. So everybody that's on the list, will send the notices out to those people to update it, just send us a card back. And that's only updating the properties that they have, okay?
Okay.
We took all the tenant stuff out before, if everybody remembers that, the tenant registration, we took that out before. All right? And we're not gonna do a renewal every 3 years, we're just gonna have to update it every 12 months now, okay?
Okay.
All right, so down in the bottom part then too, the thing we changed in number 3, this language actually came from our nuisance ordinance. And if you look at our nuisance ordinance, the number of police calls or the number of calls to that resident within a 12-month period is actually 5. We put 3 in this one when we first started for some reason. And you could ask me why we did 3, and I can't tell you why. Maybe somebody else in the room can, but when we went back to do this, we wanted to mirror it with exactly what our nuisance ordinance says. So our nuisance ordinance says 5. So we put 5 in there on 5 separate occasions.
Okay.
All right. We also put a reported. So we wanted to make sure that there were reports done with this one, and I'm not sure where it's at in this part. And we'll contact these people too. So that's the same as all in there. We just changed it from 3 to 5. So the police are going to have something to notify the property owner, you know, if in fact we have repeat offenses, you know, whether they be disorderly conduct or any kind of police calls. The next one is one that caused some dissension amongst the landlords, and it was the continually consent release. They thought that once they signed this, that they would give us a right to walk on their property at any point in time and do an inspection. So we took all of that out. So all of that consent for that interior inspection is gone, the physical on-site of both the interior and exterior. We removed all of that language. So everything in number 4 is gone.
Is it getting replaced with anything?
Huh?
Is it getting replaced with anything?
No. No. So what we decided was
Why?
that,
Yeah.
well, number 1, we hadn't been inside anyway. So if in fact we need to get inside a building, okay, it's going to happen this way anyway. And we had talked about this when we wrote it. If in fact we go and somebody puts an application in for a permit, these guys go and they find an exterior violation, okay, somewhere on the outside. They notify the owner, get this fixed. And they've done several of these. If they have no reason to believe that anything inside is wrong, then it just drop. If in fact they believe that there is something inside, if they walk up and they knock on the door and they say, sir, ma'am, you know, is your apartment okay inside? Is everything okay? You know, you're a renter here, boom. Most of the time, if somebody has an issue inside, they're going to tell you, right? Been police work a long time, you knock on a door, that's what happens. If in fact they do not, and they say no, everything's fine, or they slam the door in our face or whatever, and these guys have enough probable cause to believe that there is a violation that is occurring inside, then we'll get an administrative warrant and we'll go in and look. We're going to have to get an administrative warrant anyway. I mean, we talked about all of that before when we wrote the initial ordinance. If we're going to go inside somebody's house, you're going to have to get that administrative warrant to go inside and do that anyway to cover us. So they're going to go ahead and do that. We haven't lost a tool. We've just taken it out of here this way. They're going to operate the other way.
It's not going to make it harder for them if they feel.
Do you think it's going to make it harder for you? Okay. No, we don't believe it's going to operationally hurt us at all.
Okay.
So, that's all.
Dynamic Duo says it's okay, then it's okay.
You what?
I said
The Dynamic Duo.
Says it's okay, then okay. So can you go in if the tenant calls, or do you have to get
Absolutely.
permission from the owner?
No, the tenant.
Okay, that's good.
Absolutely.
I didn't know
Absolutely.
how that worked. Okay.
Absolutely.
To begin with. And it's-
Going down to 1B. We took out that last part, and I don't really remember why we took out pursuant to the provisions of this chapter for each separate residential rental unit involved in the residential rental business, because they just need an Erlanger residential permit to operate the business. Then we're going to list every one. So instead of having a permit for every property, which is what we were doing at the beginning, so if you had 3 or 4 different buildings, you would have 3 or 4 different permits. Now we're going to have one permit with each building listed on that permit. Right, Sherry? And that was just going to be simpler, was it not, for you?
And that's even if the properties aren't contiguous, like, or if they're not touching? So if someone has.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
that's nice.
Yeah, they can be all over the city. All you need is one permit to be in the business. You're only going to have one occupational license to be in the business. And then we're going to let, you know, when we were drafting this, I don't know, Kim, what, 2 or 3 years ago when we started working on this, you know, that was a contention we talked about a lot. You know, was it going to be buildings? Was it going to be units? Was it going to be, you know, was there going to be a permit for every one? And we ended up going down that path. Then when we started issuing all these permits, it's the same thing. You know, if you look at one of those larger apartment complexes or other people that have several properties, they had to get several permits. So now they're only going to have one permit, and they're going to have to just list every property that they have in the city on that permit.
So let's say Joe Smith has 13 properties.
Yes.
On one permit.
Yes.
But he buys a new property, gets rid of 2 properties. So
He updates the permit.
So there's a thing that tells him they have to update if there's a change?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's in here, and I don't remember what part it's in here, but it's in here that they have 30 days, I think, when there's any kind of change to tell us. Is that right, Jack? Is that in there somewhere?
Yes.
30 days.
Okay.
In there. Section 3, okay, it's going to go back to the very same thing before, and this is talking about, I think, the reporting part. We took all that out. It was the same language as in there before, talking about police calls and things like that. Again, it came from the nuisance. The occupation or use of the residential rental unit in the common areas and apparatus thereof in a manner to be occupied and used by a tenant who engages in any criminal activity classified as a misdemeanor and or a felony, including but not limited to disorderly conduct, alcohol, beverages, firearms, menacing, physical injury to a person or property, deadly weapons, gambling, prostitution, or controlled substance, to the extent that there have been documented, and that's where we put in documented responses. Because anybody, if I get mad at my neighbor, I could just call and the police would respond. So that was one of the things we wanted it to be, a documented response. Right. Okay. So that's where we put documented. Everything else reads the same as it did on the other side. Is evidenced by the creation of a police incident report, even though no charges may have been filed, because we talked a lot about that. So do you do you file charges? Do you issue citations? Do you arrest? You know, they're all kind of different things. And in all these cases, a lot of that doesn't happen, okay? But what we don't want also is to discourage people from calling the police. We didn't want to do that, to discourage that. I'll give you a prime example, the house next door to me. And we all know what lives there, you know. And they got their house broke into just last year, and he comes to my house to tell me about it. And I said, well, did you call the police? No, because our landlord told us not to call the police because of this. So needless to say, I had a conversation with that landlord and told the boys to make sure they called us every time that something got in, and their house actually did get broken into. So we didn't want to create something where people will not call the police. We want to make sure that occurs. That again, it's the 5 separate occasions, all right. And then looking at here, in addition to that, the city agrees to assist the landlord in the production of any witnesses or documentation evidencing a violation thereof, and the eviction of landlord's tenants for violation of this ordinance. So that's what the Landlord Association really wanted in there too, was that, you know, when we put that part in there, that we were going to help them in court if in fact that we would produce that documentation for them if they did that. So I think that's all the changes, you know, pretty much in that one to what we've made. So is that okay with everybody, or do we need to look into this one further?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Okay. Section 3. So, the mailing address of each building owned by the landlord. So we put building instead of each residential unit. That being because a place like Centonia. Right. If you look at Centonia, you look at these larger apartment complexes, you know, where they have 12 or so units inside of there, then they have to list every one of those. We said it's just the building that they had to list. Okay. We took out some of the other parts of this. They had some issues with some of these things too. When we had the names, the date of birth, social security numbers, and the motor vehicle operator's numbers of everybody who has ownership or interest in the residential unit or units are subject to the application. We put in this, you know, then at the end, the business name, residential and business address, and an email address, telephone numbers of the landlord and its responsible agent. I think you heard Daryl and Mark talk about it just a minute ago. We need to have somebody we can call. That's the most important part of this, is having somebody we can contact that's responsible. So that's what we wanted to have in there. So again, I don't think we're losing anything. You know, the ones that, you know, the people that now have LLCs, most of them have. You know, if they have more than 2 or 3 of these, you know, they're going to have that in there anyway. Again, in C, if you want to go to the next one, I guess it's B. We were really talking about this and said, okay, the equipment and common areas inside each residential rental unit for the inspection. These guys don't look at the equipment anyway. And when you're talking about a building that's a 4-plex or above, the fire department are the ones that are doing those inspections anyway, and they do those yearly. You know, if these guys go in to a building, they're not going to inspect the equipment. There was some discussion that we had, you know, if we're inspecting it, then are we responsible for it to make sure that it's in working order? And if we are, we don't have that expertise, at least not in the codes department doesn't. So we took equipment out of there. And again, we took out everything that says interior. We struck it in C. Again, on down in 3B, we took out equipment. I think that's it on that page. The issuance and denial. There was some parts here, and it was kind of contradictory, part of this to doing. So there was some wanting some of this done earlier. So what we didn't want to do was, you know, we had between 30 and 40 days after to receive the application. The clerk will issue one. We didn't want to hold them to that. So what we put in here was 10 days after. Thought we did inspection, Jack. Didn't we put after the inspection?
Yeah.
I don't see it in my copy. Is it in your copy?
Yes.
Maybe I'm looking at the wrong copy here. So what does yours say? I got 2 copies here. I must have got the wrong one.
Within 10 days.
Yeah,
10 calendar
it says issuance or denial of permits within 10 calendar days after inspection.
After inspection, I had the wrong copy.
Yep. Yeah, remember this is probably version 19.
Version 19?
Yeah.
You need a current version? We can give you-
I think
We're
I
not
have it.
lying, okay?
I've got the right one now. Yeah. I had 2 of them here, and I thought they were the same one. They weren't. Yeah. 'Cause
Like a 19, it seems like so many more.
These are the last ones. Yeah, yeah. So we wanted to do it after the inspection. So how this works is they apply for the permit. It goes from Sherry or her office to these guys and say, boom, this is a permit. They go do their initial inspection, okay, and then they report back saying yay or nay. If there's any violations, they report those violations and say, boom, the owner's been notified, here it is. Giving them that time to remediate whatever it may be. And if they do, they go back and look at it again, and they go ahead and send it to Sherry, or if it's the first time, they send it to her. But it'll be 10 days after that occurs that she has to, being held to that 10-day standard there, instead of 30 to 40 days. I believe that's all on that one. Go down to 5B. And we added in here that, you know, if in fact there is something that needs to be remediated, if there's a violation that needs to be fixed, okay, and it had to be done by a licensed contractor, that they would provide us that information. And who performed that? Reinspection fee, I wanted to put this back in here because we truly, reinspection fee, and guys, how many of you inspected that you denied the first time?
We're around 500 is for the total that we had, how that, because some of them are individual licenses
So, and then all those you went back, right? Right. And then they did it, but we never considered that a reinspection fee. So we never did charge anybody a reinspection fee. The way we had always looked at a reinspection fee was if in fact it had been through the whole process, okay? And we denied it altogether and they had to reapply. We weren't making people reapply. We were just getting them to fix the code's violations beforehand. So this just puts it in writing about what we do so that if they're looking at that as the initial inspection, then that next one it goes back to see if it's been remediated would not be a reinspection. So now they're saying, well, we want that clarified, so the reinspection, there won't be anything for that first reinspection.
Very fair.
And I believe that's all that's changed in that one. The last section of 3, down in 4, we changed this down. There was some concern about us taking 30 days to respond to the appeal. That's now been cut down to 10, okay? To hear the appeal, and then 15 days for me to issue, I think, a decision on that. Everything else is the same. We just changed the days in that one. And that time frame will work for us. We won't have a problem with that. And again, if we go to the next page, I guess it's 4A. This again had to deal with the interior inspections. So we took out all of that, okay, and just left it in there with city inspections of residential buildings, not units, because we wanted to change that again to buildings and not each unit. Okay, in the city are necessary for the enforcement of the applicable property maintenance laws and defined herein, which they're defined as all those codes on the very first page of all that, and we took out all the rest of this. Again, a lot of that stuff had to do with the interior inspections. Okay. And then in 3, we added, it's going to be 1 now. The scope of the inspection is limited to the inspections of conformity of the residential rental unit and building with the requirements and other provisions of this chapter, which are all talked about in the building maintenance codes and are all talking about in the fire codes and those things that are listed on page 1. And then I think we added in the bottom, took out the other part, but exempt from provisions of this chapter are non-residential units and hotels and motels and an owner-occupied building of less than 4 units. So again, we're going to leave that in right from the first part. We're just not going to add anything with the other part. That's the same language that was there in the, I believe in section 2. So that is it. And I will say this, after much discussion over the last several months that we've had, you know, this is something that I think is, that everybody can live with. It I think accomplishes what you all want to accomplish. Feel free to speak up if it doesn't. Yeah. We've met about this several times, and we believe this accomplishes what we want to accomplish. As a matter of fact, I think if you look on the City of Crestview Hills, I looked on their website this morning, very front is they had the first reading, I think March 10th, of a residential registry, rental registry that they have. So a lot of other cities are doing the same thing, talking about the very same reasons that we wanted to do this and have this tool in our toolbox. So, you know, there's another one of our neighbors that are getting ready to do the very same thing that we did a couple years ago. This just tweaks it, I think, a little bit. And like I said, we met with several people and the attorneys several times. I think we're at a place we're good.
We're doing really good on time and stuff like that, and I really appreciate this. But I got to go back to the owner-occupied. This requires them not to get the license, the occupational license. This requires no inspection, right? But they're operating a business.
I won't disagree with that one, yeah.
Okay. So I understand entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs starting out, doing this thing, but what keeps a family of 12 living in one of these duplexes next to the owner
It was
occupied?
one of the things we were trying to go against.
That's why we brought it to you. We're tasked with enforcing this. So, whatever you all decide and however you all want to look at that,
We have
it's okay with us.
89 of these that we have. That's, Sherry, is that what your count was?
Yes.
89 we've excluded.
Yeah. I mean, I just have a hard time, no occupational license, no accountability. I mean, if you're going to be a young business owner, you need to have some accountability also. If I operate a business, I have to have some certain things that I have to do. So that's just my concern. So, and I'm not doing this from a money standpoint. I'm not putting this a pressure standpoint. I'm doing this from a safety standpoint. If you're following the rules and regulations and you have the occupational license, you have a little skin in the game. If I just have a frat house.
Come over my place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's
Exactly.
one next door.
So,
What would be the cost, what is the cost to like a four-family homeowner?
What do you, what cost?
occupational license.
I don't know. The occupational license for Kenton County is what, $200? I think somebody told me.
Sounds right.
Is that it?
I believe so.
200. There's no cost to this.
Oh, no, yeah.
There's no cost to this. So.
I was kind of addressing Tyson's concerned about the little entrepreneur, but $200 is a drop in the bucket if he can afford to buy a house, I think.
And then we thought it would probably be good if it was full
Yeah.
family. The only thing is, whether they have a occupational license or not, it doesn't stop someone from having a family of 12 in a unit.
But we register them and we know.
Okay? It doesn't stop them from doing that.
Well, we only register the landlord, right?
Right.
Not the residents.
But now, it's a business.
Okay. So kind of along the ways Tom was talking, about a year ago when we had discussions, there were some people that were renting out their basements and renting out like 200 square feet to these families.
Yeah.
So how is that to be stopped?
That's a violation of the building code anyway. So so we're once we find out about those, we can take care of those. We can't have boarding houses, if that's what they call it. And there were some on this gentleman's street here on Commonwealth that we had right across the street over here that were renting out bedrooms, and we put a cease to that. So that's a different issue, I think.
Is that a
But,
zoning?
if somebody walks in and I don't think there's any regulations against this. If I want to move my whole family into my house, and all of my children and my grandchildren and everything else, there's not a thing that the city can do about that. As long as my property's maintained, there's nothing that we can do about that one. I think to Mr. Cahill's point, it's a business, so it's either way you're looking at it. If I'm renting, my duplex, then I'm in a business. So.
Mark, the other thing too is what I'm thinking is somebody, an owner might say, yeah, I'm living there, and do they take off 8 months and go to Florida, or so that they might not necessarily be living there, you know what I'm saying? So I agree with Tom. I think they should be required to get a.
Is there a reason, I was late, so I might have missed something, but is there a reason we are not requiring it now?
And I'm not exactly sure why we made that decision administratively at the beginning. You guys remember? I mean, we ended up with several of those, and
We just had people showing up that they weren't even renting the residence.
they were just living there, right?
Yeah, I own the house.
Right.
My daughter's living there.
Yeah.
She doesn't pay me rent.
Right. So that's different. Right. Yeah, I think that's different.
Basically, it's a family member
I'll say this, you know, from our standpoint, we're okay either way. Whatever you all decide that you want us to do, we'll do. You know, we don't have an opinion either way.
So would an occupational license help you guys, or does it matter?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you come to the house and he has an occupational license, oh no, my son doesn't pay rent, then then it's public service. Why do you have this license? You shouldn't renew it. No, on the other end, or you're BSing me.
But I think they're two different things. I think what you are talking about are two different things, because you're more worried about the duplex, right, that I buy and I rent out the other half.
Right.
That's what we're excluding also, owner occupied. We've already taken the family part out of this.
Correct.
From what you all said before. So now we're just talking about owner occupied. So, you know, I think that's totally different. So, you know, if in fact we don't want to, you know, give that owner occupied that break, then that's up to you all, either way you look at it. I think the family one is just super hard to prove.
Yeah, I do too.
Either way. Yeah.
But the owner occupied, how do we know it's owner occupied, is what I'm saying. You might say they are.
Well, and that,
Has to be the name
there
on
was
the
about
deed.
100 on this list, and so I asked these guys to go and knock on these doors to make sure that in fact they were renters, that there were people that were actually there. You knock on the door and ask somebody, hey, you own the house? You know, you show up looking like that, somebody's going to talk to you and say, well, no, I just rent the house. You know, John Smith owns the house, you know.
Were you pointing to
we
Daryl?
physically have
We're trying to
go.
figure out if you were pointing to Daryl when he said.
Daryl, yeah, and Mark. That's what I meant. Don't even start that. Yeah, that's what I meant.
Oh, my
So,
goodness.
yeah.
But I mean, we have to physically go and knock on the door. I mean, there's no way of getting around that.
Right.
We can't get around that whatsoever. So I think what you're talking about on the other side, you know, with the owner-occupied ones is a different situation than family ones. We're never going to be able to prove whether they pay rent or not. You know?
Well, where do we stand,
Any other
guys?
ideas on there, Renee?
What do you want to do? You want to leave it in there or you want to take it out?
I also say just go ahead and leave it in here and see, you know, if it doesn't work, we can always change it later, you know, to that.
Oh, we've never done that.
Get everything perfect.
I
the
mean,
first
so
time.
on the attorney side, you know, is there something, because now that person, like Mr. Cahill said, they're operating a business. We're holding other businesses to one standard, and we're going to hold somebody else to not that same standard. Is there a problem with that?
I don't think we're necessarily excluding that they, I mean, they probably should still get their,
The occupational?
they should still be filing with the county.
Yeah,
We're
this
just saying
ordinance
that
has
they
nothing
wouldn't
to
have
do
to
with
do it
that.
here in Erlanger.
You know, to me, I think that council can do however they wish on this issue. There's certainly arguments to be made why that you would have a registry for units beyond 4 units. I'll be honest with you, I know I put this language in here. I don't know why we put 4 units. I don't know if that was something.
Well, I think it was the owner occupied, and we looked at duplexes.
Yeah.
We said, if they got a 4-plex, we want them to get this. If they have a duplex, we don't. And then
Yeah, but I don't think there was a
I don't know that
ton
there
of-
was some reasoning.
No, I don't think that there was great reasoning as to why we stuck the number at 4. I really don't.
except that most are duplexes or fourplexes. You don't see any tries, it's about, unless it's been customized somehow, so.
I think the idea also, if I remember right, was if you had someplace like Town and Country and they list, some occupant as being a part owner, and they try to opt out of getting, having to get a permit, just because one person might be, one person out of whatever, 79 units.
Right, that's why we defined it as a number.
Right.
Right, you wouldn't want an owner living in an 80-unit apartment and somehow saying it's owner-occupied and we don't qualify. That's right. But there was no definitive reason why we chose 4 and not 3, not 2, or?
No. I think it just went up anything above it was going to be a duplex, and the next thing, the most common thing that we have are the fourplexes. And I think we just went with that 4 number because of that. Yeah. With y'all's leisure.
Renee, did you have something?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it goes, I'm kind of in the same boat that Corinne's in, but I'll concede to that. What'd I do? Yeah, we're in the same boat together. You were late and I was late.
Boy, that went right over my head.
The helicopters were circling because we were late, weren't they?
The helicopter was out there. Okay,
Tyson showed us, we'll never be late again.
Occupational license. What kind? Did you say 200?
200.
Okay.
And they have to get that regardless.
Right, and that's for the entire county.
I believe so.
Okay, so how much are you charging for the rental permits for the city?
0.
Okay. I don't have any questions then. Okay.
You should have
I mean, I think the issue really is whether
God love you.
council wants code enforcement to, for this ordinance to apply to those 79 duplexes or whatever the number is. I mean, I think that's the definitive issue, whether the purposes and intent of this ordinance should apply to duplexes. I mean,
Well, I think it does, except for the owner-occupied ones, right? Yeah.
right.
Right.
I want what's easier for those guys.
Oh, don't open up that door. I'm just
But on the same note,
Just don't have any law at all.
Right,
Yeah.
repeal the ordinance.
I think part of my
Oh
interest
my God, that's scary.
in making it enticing to an owner-occupied property was to keep them occupied and to keep people there and, to keep people interested in those properties.
And they will be better maintained. There is ownership there, and they'll be better maintained. I mean, I think that's a proven fact with everything that we've done and looked at.
Right.
So,
How do you feel,
wants to do?
Tom?
No.
Still don't like it?
No, I mean, I think it's fine. I mean, once again, the 4 makes sense now. If we duplex, the next is a quad, that's fine, as long as we're not saying that you don't have to get an occupational license. We're just saying.
We're not saying
We're not going to have you register.
right.
And then but we can still hold people accountable with the nuisance ordinances that we have.
Yes.
Okay.
And the property.
Technically, they
And the
should
property
get
maintenance.
a license through the county. Is
Karen.
that correct? Am I hearing that right? They should get a license through the county?
Technically, for the state, for the county, absolutely. Yes, they should. Yeah. Okay,
Next.
we good? Number
I'm
2?
good.
Not a county
All right.
problem, right?
Great job, guys.
Number 2. I know that Mr. Wickman sent out this list earlier today, and I don't know if him or Kim want to talk about it, but there was one property in particular that Mr. Wickman had called me about before. It's 315C Pleasure Isle Drive. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, no owner, right? Well, there's an owner. We just can't find them. We can't find them. It is an empty lot on Pleasure Isle Drive that has a property value of right around $3,000, I believe. Right around $3,000. And so Mr. Wickman and Kim had asked whether or not if we wanted to go ahead with foreclosure on this property. Since we can't find the owner, it's sitting there vacant. I know the codes guy's been in there a few times. There's a bunch of empty, that was the concrete. Concrete's been dumped on this lot. It does need cleaned up. It's right along the creek. It's in the floodplain. It is not buildable. So what we thought was to go ahead and, our suggestion would be that, with your approval, we go ahead and foreclose on this property. And then if you would give us the ability to, I guess, have Mr. Hahn go down and bid on this property for maybe that amount that the PVA says it's worth. And we'll hopefully there won't be anybody else bidding on it, because there probably won't unless it's one of the neighbors. And if it's one of the neighbors, then we'll just let them have it. But then we can maybe try to work out something to sell it to both neighbors on each side, split it one way or the other. Well, we're going to do that beforehand. Yeah.
It's in here, Kim.
We got to foreclose on it to get ownership of it. Yeah.
They buy it from the bank?
I don't believe there's any bank, there's no
Oh, there's
bank
no
involved,
bank.
and we
Oh,
can't
I
find
see.
the owner of the property. Yeah.
He probably went down the creek.
Nothing would surprise me down there.
Not down there.
So,
26,000.
but there's some other issues with the property needs to be cleaned up. We've got nobody to hold responsible for it right now. So, our suggestion would be to go ahead and foreclose on it. We'll talk to the owners of the property next to it to see if we can't work out something with them beforehand. If we can, that's great. If not, I think we still need to get it under our control so that we can go in there and hopefully keep people from dumping all the concrete on it. It's going to go in the creek and make it worse floods. Is there any other ones on here that you wanted to talk about, Mr. Wickman or Kim? There you go. Oh, come on.
Where is Casey?
The property on Pleasure Isle Drive is just sort of a symptom, if I can use that terminology. There are going to be times when that same situation occurs. The one I'm thinking of right now is the property on Cowie Avenue that just is dilapidated and needs to be torn down. What I'm afraid of is that some developer might come in and try to buy that property at the foreclosure sale, and I don't think it's a good idea to let them buy that property. We need to get control of it and demolish it and then sell the lot if that's what needs to be done.
Right.
We can buy that property for no cash because we've got a judgment for multiple thousands of dollars, which is more than what the property is worth. So we would simply bid the property in for what's owed to us. We might have to pay off some back taxes back county taxes, not city taxes, because the county taxes are sold every year and investors buy those. If we buy it in, then we would have to pay those taxes.
I've been waiting for it to be torched, to be honest with you.
I'm sorry?
I've been waiting for somebody to torch it, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
right. So I'm just indicating that that's going to come up from time to time.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all want me to identify those properties to you individually as they come up, or if you just want us to go ahead and bid them in.
I think you might as well fit them in. I mean, there's no sense to us having to come back to us every time to get approval when we need to get a hold of these properties now and take care of them instead of letting this one that's got a hole in the roof to the size of an elephant can go through there now.
Yeah.
No telling what's in there and what that place smelled like inside, but it's neat getting on there.
I'm just worried it's going to collapse on a child.
I'm worried about a child climbing in there.
Yeah.